Hi folks. In this video I'd like to go over some passages from Hume's Enquiry concerning human understanding. Let me share the screen here. Now, David Hume was one of the most important empiricist philosophers. Now, he didn't call himself that, but he was of like mind with some other philosophers like John Locke in England. David Hume was from Scotland, and like Locke and some others, Hume held the view that our best route to knowledge, our most certain way to understand the world, is through our senses. This is in contrast to René Descartes, who thought that our best route to knowledge was through, or is through, our reason. Now, where Descartes is known as a rationalist, because, not because he rationalizes things, but in a sense, rational refers to our reason or our thinking. So Descartes thinks that the true nature of things are available to us through our reason, not through our senses. Our senses deceive us, where our reason is the most certain way we can know things. Now, Hume thought that this was not right, that first and foremost, our senses give us real knowledge. Although we do have ideas, certainly, our ideas are composed of the evidence of our senses. So he'll say, for instance, that any idea that you have will have originated in our senses, that there are no ideas that we have that are innate, and there are no ideas that don't originate through our senses. So let's look at some of the text here. So right from the start, Hume says, everyone will readily allow that there is a considerable difference between the perceptions of the mind, when a man feels the pain of excessive heat or the pleasure of moderate warmth, and when he afterwards recalls to his memory this sensation or anticipates it by his imagination. So he's making a distinction here between two different kinds of perception. One that happens when we feel things the first time, and then later when we recall these sensations to memory, we bring it up in our imagination. Those are really the two kinds of ways we can know anything. He's going to divide these into two kinds of things: impressions and ideas. So he says here, he says, let us therefore use a little freedom and call them impressions, employing that word in a sense somewhat different than usual. By the term impression, then, I mean, and he greatly simplifies this, I mean all our more lively perceptions when we hear or see or feel or love or hate or desire or will. So from the actual experience, you think of this as the actual experience. When we have an actual experience, it's a more lively perception, he says. We feel it more strongly. And he says, and impressions are distinguished from ideas. This is the other category of perceptions that we have, which are the less lively perceptions of which we are conscious when we reflect on any of those sensations or movements above mentioned. So he really simplifies this. He reduces all human experience down to impressions and ideas. Impressions are the more lively, the more strong and intense experiences that we have, things that happen at the time that something occurs in our experience. And ideas are really just going back and remembering those impressions. So all through here, I'm skipping around, I'm just hitting some main points. All of this is explanatory, all of this is great. Hume, students often complain to Hume, like Mill especially, it seems very wordy. Hume uses a lot of words, but he tries to compact a lot of ideas in a small amount of space, and I think he does a pretty good job. It's a little flowery, but with some work, you can find out a lot of things. And every time I read this is one of those works of philosophy. Every time I read it, I find out something new, or I think about it in a different way, because I'm different each time. I have a different experience. Let's look at this. I'm going to point out some middles of sentences. All our ideas are copies of our impressions. Okay, so that's one way that the way that I underline things is I go through a text like Hume's or Mill's or Kant's or some of the others, and I look for the essential sentence. When the sentences are really long and there's a lot of information packed in and many clauses, that doesn't mean that it's a run-on sentence. It means that there's a lot of clauses and it's a long, complex sentence. So I go in and I look for the simple sentence that's embedded there. Okay. And the simple one would not be enough for what he's trying to say, but when one is trying to just get an overall understanding of what he's talking about, then that's not a bad way to do it, I think. So more about these this relationship here. He says, we may, okay, let's see here. Let's see. We shall always find, now I'm just showing you where I underlined a simple sentence. We shall always find that every idea is copied from a similar impression. Okay, some of this wordiness, he's repeating himself, but that's really kind of good, right? Because the ideas are rather deep and they're unfamiliar from our day-to-day lives. And so I think it's good to have some repetition here so we know we're on the right track. By producing that idea, which in their opinion is not derived, is not derived from this source. Okay. So let me read that again. We shall always find that every idea is copied from a similar impression by producing that idea, which is not derived from this source. Secondly, if it happens from a defect of the organ that a man is not susceptible of any species of sensation, we always find that he is as little susceptible of the correspondent ideas. So in other words, you can't have the idea of something if you have not had the sensation before. So you can't have an idea of a certain shade of blue unless you've had an experience of that shade of blue before. Now, Hume kind of changed his opinion on this in later years and thinks that maybe we can infer certain things from what we already know, but he's certainly nothing like Descartes. Descartes thinks we can infer all kinds of things about the world from what we already know. Okay, and along with these impressions and ideas, they relate to two kinds of ways of understanding the world. All of the objects of human reason are inquiry, and objects of human reason just means all the things we can reason about, okay? And that's things in the real world or things, ideas in our mind. All of the objects of human reason or inquiry may naturally be divided into two kinds: relations of ideas and matters of fact. Of the first kind are the sciences of geometry, algebra, and arithmetic. In short, every statement which is either intuitively or demonstratively certain. Demonstratively means you can work it out sort of logically. Intuitively means it's something that just pops up, some idea that pops up. So relations of ideas are ideas like geometry, algebra, and arithmetic, okay, where you don't have things in the real world that relate to them. Propositions of this kind are discoverable by the mere operation of thought without dependence on what is anywhere existent in the universe. Okay, what about matters of fact? The contrary, let's see, matters of fact. Okay, here we go. Matters of fact. So this is the other one. Relations of ideas and matters of fact. Those are two different things. Matters of fact are the second objects of human reason, so we can know matters of fact, are not ascertained in the same manner, nor is our evidence of their truth, however great. Okay? The contrary of every matter of fact is still possible because it can never imply a contradiction. Okay? Just think about that, that a matter of fact is something that you can imagine a contradiction. It doesn't mean that there is a contradiction. Got to be a contradiction. I mean, it means that it's about the contingent world. Okay, the world that depends, whether something's true or false, depends on the way the world happens to be. Now, this can get extreme. It can be anything from this table is brown. It could have been purple. So certainly this table, if I said this table is purple, it would be not true. It would be false, but it would not be a contradiction. It wouldn't lead to a logical contradiction. Whereas relations of ideas always lead to a contradiction. So think of 2 and 2 is 4, right? Say I were to change that and say 2 and 2 is 5. 2 and 2 cannot possibly be 5. It would be a contradiction. So similarly, if I said, well, I have a 4-sided triangle, so that's not possible. It's a contradiction. But if I said that the sun will not rise tomorrow, that's still an intelligible proposition and implies no more contradiction than the affirmation that it will rise. All reasonings concerning matter of fact, or matters of fact, seem to be founded on the relation of cause and effect. Now he's building up here this idea of what, not this idea, I'm sorry. I say that a lot, I'm trying to stop. So he's building up here, he's exploring just exactly how we understand the world. And he's saying, well, there's two kinds of ways that information comes in, impressions and ideas, and well, actually impressions, and then we have ideas. So there's two things that we deal with as far as knowing, and then there are two things that we can know. We can know ideas, relations of ideas, like math and so on, and then we can know matters of fact. So what is all of that based on? Well, all of our reasonings concerning matters of fact are grounded on this relation of cause and effect. So everything we can know about the world is based on cause and effect. I know that's one of those no-duh things, cause and effect. We take it for granted. We, take this clip and I drop it. The cause is I let it go, and then that loud annoying noise is an effect of my letting it go, right? Seems like no big deal. We usually don't question that. But he wants to push this a little further. He says, by means of that relation, cause and effect, alone, we can go beyond the evidence of our memory and senses. Okay, what does he mean here? Let's see. He says, here it is constantly supposed that there is a connection between the present fact and that which is inferred from it. We must inquire how we arrive at the knowledge of cause and effect. So how do we know? So in other words, if I'm getting ready to drop this, I'm not going to drop it again. But if I let this go, I know what's going to happen. Well, how do I know that? Well, cause and effect, right? The cause produces an effect. But how do I know that cause and effect obtain? How do I know that when I let this go, it's going to drop on the table rather than, say, fly upwards or turn into a chicken? How do I know that? How do I know that? I know we want to say, well, we just know. But think about that. How do we know that one thing causes another? How do we know that the fact that things cause other things is always going to happen? Well, Hume says, I shall venture to affirm that the knowledge of this relation attained by reasonings a priori, I'm sorry, I read that wrong. Let's start over. I shall venture to affirm that the knowledge of this relation is not attained by reasonings a priori, but arises constantly from experience. Okay, reasonings a priori. There's a distinction between a priori reasoning, which is prior. You think of the word prior in there, it just means prior to experience. So a priori reasoning is reasoning that we do with our mind alone. So mathematics is a priori reasoning. Now we need our senses to say, learn from others how certain certain operations in mathematics or certain rules work. But a lot of mathematics, once we get going, once we learn the basic rules, that, by the way, other people had to figure out a priori, we can work out a lot of math a priori prior to experience, outside of actual doing things with the world. So 2 and 2 is 4. I know that I don't have to, test it every time. Like in a laboratory, if I have 2 completely different things that I've never seen before and 2 other completely different things that I've seen before, if I want to add them together, that happens in my mind. I don't have to run the experiment. It's not like if I have 2 things and 2 things totally unfamiliar, then I have to say, well, I don't know if this will be 4. I'm going to have to do an experiment. Continuing, arises entirely from experience. You're saying cause and effect is not a priori. Now, this is kind of a big deal. At the time, it was thought that that cause and effect is just one of those things that that it's like a law of reason. It's like a logical thing, very logical thing. But he says he thinks it arises entirely from experience. When we find that any particular objects are constantly conjoined with each other. It's very important, constantly conjoined. All he means there is that they, one happens after the other, right after the other. They constantly conjoined. So if I'm going to let this clip go, it falls to the table. How do I know that it's going to do that? The only way that I know that that a certain cause is going to lead to a certain effect is because every time I've done it in the past, or something like this in the past, it's always been that I do one thing, let it go, and then the other thing happens. So the 2 events are constantly conjoined, put together. 2 of them constantly are like that. And so then we infer cause and effect. So he continues. No object ever discovers by the qualities which appear to the senses either the causes which produced it or the effects which will arise from it. Now, I know it's weirdly worded, but just a moment, and let's read on. Nor can our reason, unassisted by experience, ever draw any inference concerning real existence and matter of fact. If you go back and read that, he's talking in the beginning about, the point of view of the object, but all he's saying is what we've been saying, that without experience, we would never know that one thing leads to another. Now, he's not talking about particular things, but he means that we wouldn't know that things lead to other things unless we had experienced that in the past. And he gives some particular examples about 2 pieces of marble that are put together. If somebody didn't know that that's what happened, then there's no way they would know one caused the other. We wouldn't know that bread would nourish us unless we had actually seen that happen. We wouldn't know one billiard ball runs into the other. He says, the mind can never possibly find the effect in the supposed cause by the most accurate scrutiny and examination. For the effect is totally different from the cause and constantly can never be discovered in it. Motion in the second billiard ball is a quite distinct event from motion in the first, nor is there anything in the one to suggest the smallest hint of the other. So I think what he's saying is we're accustomed to thinking there's something logical about one billiard ball hitting another and the other one moving, like it's all one event, and cause and effect is just something that always happens. He's saying that it's only because we have had experience of it in the past that we know that one thing happens after another. And he's talking about, in the abstract, cause and effect. That cause and effect is a thing. For anything is something that we can't know unless we had experience. That's all very strange, and its implications may not be clear yet, but I hope that I can point at them briefly in a moment. Let's see here. Let me find my place here. It must certainly be, okay. Okay, here. It is allowed on all hands that there is no known connection between the sensible qualities and the secret powers. So he's saying that people tend to think that there's some kind of secret power of cause and effect. And consequently, that the mind is not led to form such a conclusion concerning their constant and regular conjunction. There's those two words again. By anything which it knows of their nature. As to past experience, it can be allowed to give direct and certain information of those precise objects only in that precise period of time which fell under its cognizance. Okay? But why this experience should be extended to future times and to other objects, for all we know, maybe only in appearance similar. This is the main question I would insist on. Okay, so what he's saying here, and this is getting a little closer to the main point, is that when I let this clip go, before I let it go, even though I've seen this 1,000 times, I can't know, I can't for certain or logically know that this is going to happen. Okay, I did it again. I know it's annoying. I apologize. But I can't know that the effect is going to follow from the cause, even though I've done it 1,000,000 times, right? It's purely by experience that I know that, and so I can't know the next time. It could be different next time. Okay, let's see here. Let's move to 95. Okay, all inferences from experience, all inferences from experience suppose as their foundation. Okay, so this is the next level, that the future will resemble the past and that similar powers will be conjoined with similar sensible qualities, right, as would happen before. If there be any suspicion that the course of nature may change and that the past may be no rule for the future, all experience becomes useless and can give rise to no inference or conclusion. It is impossible, therefore, that any arguments from experience can prove this resemblance of the past to the future, since all these arguments are founded on the supposition of that resemblance. So he gives some other examples here, but another level of our sort of faith that cause and effect are a thing. The whole idea of one thing leads to the other. Actually, he wouldn't say faith, so I should take that. It's not faith. This is going to. It's that, but it's similar in that we don't have evidence that cause and effect will always work that way. It's because we have such confidence in cause and effect because we assume that the future will be like the past. How do we know the future will be like the past? You know, the sun came up yesterday, came up the day before. For all we know, it's come up for thousands of years every morning. Of course, it doesn't really come up, but we can talk that way in this instance. The earth turns, the sun doesn't come up, but the sun will rise tomorrow. We don't know for sure. It's just because we think that the way things have happened in the past are going to continue to happen in the future. And what is this based on? So what is the foundation? He keeps going to the foundations of things. And he's got the next to last level is the idea that the future will be like the past. And he says that this principle is, and this is the final point, this whole idea of cause and effect, which, by the way, all of our science is based on. I mean, all these studies, things that we think we know for sure, all of our studies are based on cause and effect, are based on the idea that the future will be like the past, whether it's psychology or chemistry or physics. What is it that gives us such certainty that science is going to keep giving us knowledge? What is that all built on? Hume is saying here that the principle involved is custom or habit. For wherever the repetition of any particular act or operation produces a propensity to renew the same act or operation without being impelled by any reasoning or process of the understanding, we always say that this propensity is the effect of custom. And finally, and let's see where certain? Yes. Certain. When we assert that after the constant conjunction of two objects, we are determined by custom alone to expect the one from the appearance of the other. All inferences from experience, therefore, are effects of custom, not of reasoning. Okay? So it's just because we do it, we're used to it, that's the way we do it. So that's it, custom, cause and effect. So let me run through that one more time, just to summarize. So impressions and ideas are the two things that we have in ourselves, that we get information about the world, about things. Everything starts as an impression. All of our senses, everything starts with our senses, right? That's why he's an empiricist, because he thinks that the senses are our best route to knowledge. But they're like Descartes, there's some skepticism here, because as he works his way through, he's saying that we can't be absolutely sure. We can doubt all of our knowledge. Now, he's not doubting everything. He's not acting like he doesn't believe anything when he goes out and, you know, goes to work and walks down the street and everything. He acts like anybody else, right? He puts philosophy aside and his radical skepticism aside when he lives his life. But he's saying that as he works through these ideas, that we gain knowledge of the world through impressions and ideas, or rather we gain knowledge through impressions and then they're organized into ideas in our mind. That the two kinds of things we can know about are matters of fact and relations of ideas, and that the way we know matters of fact is through cause and effect. Cause and effect, very important. The whole basis for science being a thing, being how we think we really know things. But what is cause and effect based on? It's based on believing that the future will resemble the past. And why do we think that? Why do we think the future will resemble the past? It's not logically impossible that all emeralds are green until 2 o'clock today, and then chemistry changes entirely and all emeralds turn blue. There's a famous paper about that. Emeralds are green up until a certain time, after which they're grue. And the color grue just means green before a certain time and blue after that. It's not logically impossible that all chemistry changes at a certain time and is brand new. Why do we think the future will be like the past? Because that's what we do. It's our custom, it's our habit, maybe it's instinct, but it's not a logical certainty, not an absolute logical certainty. I hope this has helped to understand this very important paper, and I hope you have a nice week and day and night and every other 24-hour period. Okay? Thanks very much, and bye-bye.